Welcome back to ManaTutor MTG Draft. Pioneer Masters drops on Arena Tuesday, December 10th, so today we're giving our predictions of color rankings and archetype rankings for Draft. This will be a quick episode to give you the big picture of what colors and archetypes to favor and what ones to avoid. If you're looking for a deeper card-specific dive into Pioneer Masters, please check out our last episode in the link above or the description below. Matt, ready to dive in?
Yep, let's do it.
We graded the commons and uncommons because those are the rarities you can depend on getting in draft and they drive the format. A's were bombs, B's were cards that pull you into a color, C's are playables, D's are filler, and F's are unplayables. We assigned each grade a number, as you can see here, starting with 1 at D+, because those are usually the weakest cards you put into your deck. Then we took the average grade amongst cards at a D+ grade or higher. And multicolored cards count into each of their colors. Also note, there's a rotating bonus sheet that is Planeswalkers based for the first 2 weeks, Spells based in the second 2 weeks, and Devotion based in the last 2 weeks, so we graded each period separately, including only the cards in that period. So in the first 2 weeks, which is Planeswalkers based bonus sheet and the rest of the main set, we have the following color strengths, with black being up first as the highest strength, followed by red, followed by green, then white, then blue. Note that black and red were pretty close there. Green was in the middle, and white and blue are lowest, as you can see with this color tiering here. In the next 2 weeks, which is the spells-based bonus sheet, the colors were very close, but red eked out black in that one, followed by then green, white, and blue like we saw before. And in the last 2 weeks, which is a devotion-based bonus sheet, we had the same type of rankings here, with red first, then black, then green, then white, then blue. And so if we were to summarize this, overall, we would say black and red are equally up in tier 1. Green comes in third, white in fourth, and blue in last. So Matt, curious of your take of these color rankings.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of typical of what we see. I think, black and red tend to have the most removal. So they like hard removal, right, as opposed to bouncing and soft removal. So they tend to be up high. Blue being in last place is also not necessarily a surprise. Again, commonly a thing that happens especially in draft, just because it's harder. It's harder to play. It's usually slower. It usually tends to kind of lend itself to more of like a control style that works in constructed, but not always so much in draft. I think that the takeaway for me here is this is actually probably one of the closest spreads of rankings we've seen in a while. Compare that to foundations, which we did about a month ago now, and there was like more than a full grade between the first ranked color and the last ranked color, and now we've got about a half grade. The spells based one is a little wider, but both the planeswalkers and the devotion based ones are basically like a half grade. So while we're ranking these, it doesn't necessarily mean that blue is unplayable by any means, I think, and certainly less so than we've seen in previous sets. These are actually pretty tightly graded together, so I'm actually interested to see, because I don't think that you'll see the kind of huge differences in win rates that we've seen so far in, say, like foundations, with green just being absolutely abysmal in foundations. I don't think blue will be absolutely abysmal here, but I do think you'll see kind of a little bit of a gradation in them.
Yeah, in fact, so we definitely don't have the problem of green in foundations, right? Where even in this same episode of color and archetype rankings, we called out a greater than, as in a much greater is all the other colors but green. That is not the case here. So I don't think we need to hard avoid any color up front.
Yeah.
I may still soft avoid it in week 1 for blue, because I do think it's the weakest color, so I'm going to try to favor the other open lanes. But if I'm being past blue, I will be taking it. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. And similarly with white, I think white actually has a potential to be very strong, and we can kind of talk about that a little bit in the archetypes. There's a lot of great stuff in white. The first couple of weeks too, if other people are avoiding it, I will absolutely be gobbling it all up. So now we're going to take a look at the individual archetype rankings. And so similar to the color rankings that Jeremy just ran through, the individual archetype rankings are based on the average rating of cards that go into those archetypes. And so that includes multicolored cards for each of their archetypes, and individual monocolored cards for the archetypes that they fit best into. As you can see here, a lot of these have a lot of commonalities across the 3 different bonus sheet periods. You can see, obviously, for example, Blue White Skies is kind of ranked the lowest in all of them, and Black Red Mid Range is ranked either the top or the high or the second, and same with Red Green quote unquote Stompy. Kind of running through them a little bit here. There are not formal archetype names or discussions in this set, that's similar to how Wizards has done this in previous sets. But to give a flavor of each archetype and what they do, I'll just run through them really quickly. So, Black Red Mid Range, it's in the name. You're going to be playing out some spells early, trying to remove some of your opponent's stuff, and then eventually overwhelming your opponent with larger creatures or just enough removal to clear the way for your smaller ones. Red Green Stompy, Red Green Trample. We see this in a lot of sets. Just big creatures, overpower your opponents, get through your damage. Black Green Mid Range. This is going to have a little bit of a graveyard mechanic with it as well. There's going to be some self mill and then ability to pull things from your graveyard with a number of your cards. A couple of the signpost commons and uncommons in Golgari will have that. White Red Heroic. So this is all going to be all about playing those creatures that have heroic, and then either playing auras or playing instants and sorceries that target those creatures and get you benefits. So like Anax and Cyanide is like the signpost uncommon there, where you target it and it gives +1/+1 and trample to your whole board. Blue Black Control, pretty standard what you see in blue and black. You're going to be trying to remove or tempo your opponent. There is also a lot of mill in Blue Black Control, so I think Blue Black Control will probably lend itself to trying to mill out your opponent. Blue Red Spells, again, commonly what we see, put down creatures that have prowess, and then take advantage of those by casting either damage or removal or card draw spells. White Green Mid Range, similar to Black Red Mid Range, you're going to kind of like try and tempo your board a little bit. This is going to have a lot of tokens generation in it. There's a lot of white and a lot of green ways to generate tokens and affect the board with those tokens. So I think you're going to see a lot of that in this particular archetype. Blue-green ramp, commonly seen in sets. This is about getting lands on the board, using that ramp to then fuel card draw engine, fuel big creatures that you can put out with green and overpower your opponent. White-black attrition. This, I think, is going to have probably the most auras that you're going to see in any of the decks. There's a lot of bestow cards in both white and black that I think are going to be pretty common here. And so being able to just kind of put out that bestow on a creature, swing in, attrition your opponent down. Even if they kill the creature, you get the bestowed card back. And then white blue skies is, it's in the name. It's all about flying creatures, empowering those flying creatures, getting in the damage overhead of your opponent before they can take you out. So that's just a quick description of all of the archetypes, sort of how we saw them when we graded. Like I said, no official description, but that's how we think they'll likely play.
Yeah, the particular names for each of the archetypes came from draftsim.com, and because there's everyone's kind of putting their own names on each one of these. There are certain flavors of things, like Blue-Black Control also does, like Matt said, has a mill theme to mill your opponent, also has a mill theme even to mill yourself and do some delve, for example. Right. So there's little mechanics in between, but if you go through the set, there are a revisiting of like over a dozen mechanics. Right. So because they're so widespread, these mechanics, I don't think that this will be as synergy based of like synergistically combining everything into a particular mechanic. It's more like a hodgepodge of different mechanics throughout. And as such, I do think the set is going to be more about identifying the good cards and getting a group of good cards that do go to a cohesive plan of either aggro, mid-range, or control, but not are particularly fueling a given mechanic, for example, with maybe the exception of the one named mechanic here in Heroic. So yeah, I think that's more how you'll see the set.
Yeah, exactly. And so talking a little bit about the archetype rankings, obviously, we kind of see black red and red green as the strongest in all three of the sort of bonus sheet time periods, and blue white as the kind of the weakest in all of those. I don't know that I will be hard avoiding blue white. Certainly, if I get past enough things, and the signpost uncommons in that are actually pretty good cards. So if you can get those signpost uncommons, I think that's probably gonna raise the game a little bit on blue white skies here. But this sees a much larger gradation, so to speak, than what we just saw in the colors, and so. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Jeremy, but it's definitely wider when you start looking and breaking out the individual archetypes.
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm going to hard avoid blue white skies, but I am going to very strongly bias against it, and that's the only deck I think I'm very biased against for the start. And these are subjective grades, right? That we could be wrong.
Right.
Like blue white skies might be better. I will say it's not that we have a bias against blue white skies. I think we predicted that as our top archetype in Foundations, right?
Right.
So like,
Yeah.
so this really
And
is
it's pretty
just what
good.
came out. Our Foundations grades are pretty accurate. Here, I will say this is a tougher set to grade, so I am less confident in our grades here than I was in Foundations and Duskmorn. That said, it's our best guess here, and I think in the end it'll be reasonably close. As that blue white skies is the one deck I think I'm looking to avoid at the start, and the rest I'm pretty happy to get into. So one thing to mention, you will see that blue actually gets a little bit worse in our rankings under the spells period, which is interesting because blue you think of as spells, right? I
Right.
think most of the spells that they're introducing, though, are a lot more of your aggressive heroic type of spells.
Yep.
And so just something to call on out, like during spells week, it doesn't mean go more into blue,
Right.
as you might assume it does. It could be a lot of that is powers and tricks and more aggressive type spells. So that's all for initial opinions of colors and archetype rankings for Pioneer Masters. We'll be interested to see how that plays out in the first week. Like we said, it does drop on Arena on Tuesday, December 10th. We will be taking our first look and playing our games and having an episode probably mid that week on our first opinions of Pioneer Masters, and we'll see how accurate we are. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to like and subscribe to see our upcoming episodes, and see you in the next one.
See you in the next one.